Chag Pesach Sameach, everyone. Happy Feast of Passover. Today is the first day of matzah. It's the first day of unleavened bread. Last night we had our Seder meal together, and we were just glorifying what the Father, what Yeshua, and the Ruach HaKodesh did for Israel by delivering them out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt, also the mixed multitude, and also what Yeshua did for us on the cross and his resurrection for all mankind. It was a wonderful celebration, and I hope you are celebrating it also. It has such deep meaning in the scriptures. And isn't it awesome that today, on the first day of unleavened bread, we're going to talk about Acts chapter 15. We're going to do an overview of the chapter, looking at what do we do with these Gentiles that are coming into the kingdom? What kind of weight or yoke are we going to put on them? That's what's going to be discussed here in Acts chapter 15. And we want to keep everything according to its historical context, setting, and language, so that when we find the biblical truths within this chapter, they can transcend any generation. Amen. So come on with me. Let's go ahead and go to Acts chapter 15. All right, so here we are in Acts chapter 15, and Paul and Barnabas have just finished their missionary journey not too long ago, that first one. They are seeing Gentiles coming into the kingdom now. We're talking about 15 years or more after the resurrection of Yeshua. Gentiles are starting to kind of flood into the kingdom. And so there's a concern. What kind of yoke, what kind of weight are we going to put on these Gentiles who are coming in? Well, as you can see in verse 1 of chapter 15, it states, "Now some men coming down from Judea were teaching the brothers, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moshe, you cannot be saved." So notice it says custom, okay, not the law of Moshe. So there is a big difference. These are oral traditions. All right, verse 2. When Paul and Barnabas had a big argument and debate with them, the brothers appointed Paul and Barnabas with some others from among them to go to Jerusalem to the emissaries and elders about this issue. So that's where they're going to head to get the issue settled. You see, since the Maccabean revolt, circumcision was a huge issue, considering that the Jewish people almost became extinct in the land, because after the Maccabean revolt, once they won the victory, they re-cleansed the temple and they reinstituted the Torah because it had been outlawed, which meant circumcision was outlawed. So what the Parashim did was they began to build all kinds of fence laws around circumcision, and they called it the customs of Moshe. But really, it didn't date back to Moshe. It was just the Parashim trying to put a heavy yoke on the people. All right, and that's what it turned out to be. So as you can see in Matthew chapter 23, Yeshua didn't have problems with the Parashim when they taught you correctly how to follow the Torah. He said they sit on the seat of Moses. So you need to listen and do what they say. That means when they're teaching you the Torah, all right, right straight from Moses, you listen and do it. But he said, don't do as they do. They are hypocrites. He says they put a heavy yoke on the people. Well, that yoke is the oral law. It's the man-made traditions. And that's even a heavy yoke today in many of Western Christianity and many other places. The man-made traditions is a heavy yoke at times. So they're going to head down here to Jerusalem and discuss this issue. Verse 5, it says here in Acts, "But some belonging to the party of the Parashim who had believed stood up, saying, it is necessary to circumcise them and to command them to keep the law of Moshe." Okay, so we've got two things on the agenda. Number one, forced circumcision. Number two, keep the law of Moshe. Let's go ahead and see what they end up doing, okay? Now, they're going to get into the debate. They're going to start talking about this. Now, Peter, he's going to stand up and he's going to tell them that he was sent to the Gentiles, all right, and that he was a witness that the Ruach HaKodesh filled the Gentiles who were uncircumcised, just like they were filled in Acts chapter 2, you know, because Peter in Acts chapter 10 saw it firsthand. And so he shows them and tells them that the Ruach HaKodesh makes no distinction between them and us. He purifies everyone by faith. Well, that makes a whole lot of sense because Abraham was a uncircumcised person and he came into the kingdom by faith and wasn't forced circumcision. So this is what the Torah teaches. You don't have to be circumcised to come into the kingdom. Not even the mixed multitude had to be forced to be circumcised to be saved by grace. And so there is this heavy yoke now that the Parashim had placed on all the Jewish people and the Gentiles. Peter makes it very clear that not even this yoke our fathers could bear. It is so heavy. And that's why, again, Yeshua, Matthew 23, lets them know it's too heavy. Okay. So this is not keeping Torah. This is keeping the oral traditions of men. All right. And that's being connected to circumcision. So this is the big issue. Let's go ahead and lay down circumcision. It wasn't commanded in the Torah for a Gentile in the first place. Okay. Not for salvation, right? You didn't see forced circumcision for salvation for any Gentile. Okay. So as we continue, Paul and Barnabas are going to share and agree with Peter. And so then Yaakov is going to stand up and he's going to begin to say in himself, boy, this makes a lot of sense because yes, Yeshua has rebuilt the fallen tabernacle of David. Amen. But also, what was the purpose of it? It wasn't just for the Jewish people. In verse 17, it also states that it was for the Gentiles, so that the Gentiles could come in, so that Yahweh could call all of them in. And so everyone comes in by grace into the kingdom. Okay. But after they come in by grace, then what do? Do they follow the law of Moshe? And the answer is going to be yes, they do. So circumcision is not to be forced. Circumcision is not the marker of salvation. It never was. But now, what do we do with these Gentiles? Well, Jacob says in verse 19, therefore I judge not to trouble those among the Gentiles who are turning to God. You see, they've come in by faith and grace through the blood of Yeshua. They are turning to God. So now what do? He says, but write to them to abstain from contamination of idols. Okay, lay down your idolatry, because if you don't, you bring contamination into the Jewish community. You bring in spiritual impurity and ritual impurity. Okay, and then it says, and from sexual immorality. Again, you bring in spiritual impurity and ritual impurity. These are all Torah commands. He's getting all of these from the Torah. All right, and we go on, and from what is strangled. What is strangled? Well, we know that pagans love to, when they killed the animal for their sacrifices, they strangled the blood or the animal so that the blood stayed in the animal, so that they could eat and drink the blood. All right, and we know the Torah command states in Leviticus 17 that they are not to eat blood, drink blood. And so again, this is another Torah command. It brings contamination to the community. All right, both spiritually and ritually. And then, of course, blood, anything blood. Don't commit murder, don't drink blood, eat blood. Okay, this is reinforcing a community. All right, they need to stay ritually pure and they need to stay spiritually pure because they are coming out of their pagan beliefs. This all follows in line with Torah. So, in no way are they abandoning the law of Moshe. He's actually telling them, let's be patient with them. But these four things they must do right away. Okay. And then he goes on in verse 21 to say, for Moses from ancient generations has in every city those who proclaim him, since he is read in all synagogues every Shabbat. This is just a Jewish way of saying, all right, we're going to make them do these four things because it will make them spiritually and ritually unclean right off the bat. They have to do that in order to be in our community. Okay. Otherwise, they can't even come in. Then they will learn the rest gradually as they come on Shabbat and hear the law of Moshe. So they are commanded to keep the law of Moshe, but they're going to give them grace. They're going to let them learn over time slowly. And the community is going to be patient with them and teach them, all right, how to follow the law of Moshe. So we're not going to put circumcision on them. And we're going to just do these four things because we don't want to be ritually contaminated or spiritually contaminated right off the bat. But they will learn the law of Moshe as we give them grace and be patient with them and teach them. Amen. So, verse 22, then it seemed good to the emissaries, elders, with the whole community to choose men from among themselves to send to Antioch with Paul and Barnabas. They sent Judah and Silas, leading men among the brothers, and this letter along with them. Okay, stating exactly what they shared here. So they are making this as a community, not one person's deciding all this, but as a community of Jewish believers coming together. We are not going to force circumcision on them. That was a tradition of man. Okay, that's not in the Torah, but they will learn the Torah. Okay, they will learn right away certain things they need to give up quickly. or they can't even be in our community. The rest, they will learn on Shabbat. They will learn how to love Yahweh with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. They will learn how to love their neighbor as themselves. That's what the Torah teaches them. And that's what Yeshua did. Yeshua was a Torah observant Jew who taught you how to keep the Torah. They are not going to violate the words of Yeshua or his teachings. And so, yes, following the law of Moshe is part of Acts 15 for the Gentiles, but they are to learn over time, and we are to be patient with them as they learn. Amen. And so the letters are going to go out. This is just going to be a powerful time, and we are going to see the work of Yeshua. Paul and Barnabas are going to go out and just preach the gospel message even more. Amen. And so this concludes our Acts 15 overview. Next time together, we will get into Acts chapter 16 and the second missionary journey of Paul and Barnabas. So until we meet again, everyone, shalom.